Hey everybody, there's one clue about Rendlesham Forest UFO that nobody knows about, is ignored, and that's the power supply of the exotic physics. Hey and welcome back. Flying saucers, UFOs, UAP, plasma weapons, directed energy weapons, advanced radar, all need a power supply. Today let's begin to lift the curtain on Britain's best kept secret. Sizewell A Nuclear Power Station.
Far below, work started on the intricate task of creating the heart of the reactor, the furnace to draw heat from the new fuel of the atomic age.
But before I discuss the true secret history of the Sizewell Magnox Nuclear Power Station, you have to understand why it was built in Suffolk. This is Orford Ness, Britain's most secret advanced physics weapon range, where everything from Tesla's death ray to advanced directed energy weapons have been tested for over 100 years. It's a shingle bank facing the North Sea. It's in very rural Suffolk and can't even be reached by road. At one time, the only way to get onto the secret Orford Ness was by boat. More recently, a bridge was built to a very interesting building. Let me start by building you a picture of Orford Ness and why Sizewell A Nuclear Power Station was built right next door. So what actually went on in Orford Ness? Well, it's absolutely fascinating. It was always an MOD or a War Department range. It was used for bomb testing. But Orford Ness's first use for advanced physics was Nikola Tesla's death ray. The plans had been probably stolen and given to Robert Watson Watt to build. His mission, if he got the death ray to work, was to demonstrate it by killing a sheep that lived on Orford Ness. Luckily, it didn't work for a very interesting reason. Robert Watson Watt said, "I understand the principle. Tesla's death ray is very advanced, but it has a major problem. There's no way we can turn it on. We don't have the power supply." And that power supply story is going to go through this video today, and you'll begin to understand why Sizewell A Nuclear Power Station isn't just a nuclear power station, why it was built in Suffolk, a million miles away from industrial Britain, and why it undoubtedly was the main power source for advanced weapon testing on Orford Ness and elsewhere. So we all know the story that Robert Watson Watt, after working at Orford Ness, invented radar. Well, he didn't. He did an experiment called the Daventry experiment, where the GPO's transmitter for the BBC sent a beam which reflected off an airplane, and he saw the trace move. And that led to an amazing discovery by Robert called RDF, or radio direction finding. It was simply brilliant. It was almost as good as Tesla's death ray, and very useful in World War II, and became wonderful when Britain stole the Ukrainian cavity magnetron and turned it into the American named radar. But radar wasn't just about seeing things bouncing off airplanes. It was also about radio direction finding. And Orford Ness was where the beams were sent out. What were these beams and what were they doing? Well, there was a big lie in World War II, and that was the Norden bomb site that claimed you could drop a bomb in a pickle barrel. It didn't work. It was far too complicated to use under battle conditions in a rocking and rolling, flax-filled sky of a US bomber over Germany. A much better way would be to have a crossing beam, one from Orford Ness, one from somewhere else, which you could, in your plane, see how far left and right from the two intersecting beams, and when it crossed, you pressed bombs away and dropped your bomb into the pickle barrel. And that was what they were doing from Orford Ness, and it needed power. Military physics, people, is the key. If you can build a weapon that your enemy doesn't know what hit them, you've won the war. That's what happened in World War II. The atom bomb ended World War II with a blackboard equation which changed the history of warfare. It was physics becoming a weapon, and Britain always was good at physics. Ever since Ernest Rutherford discovered the true nature of the atom, and Chadwick defined the neutron, which went on to explain how a chain reaction would multiply, Britain led in physics. And one of the things that they were always interested in is DEW, directed energy weapons, plasma. In this timeline I'm sharing with you today, from Tesla's death ray to the Rendlesham Forest UFO, the next thing that happened changed the world as we know it. Over occupied Germany, Allied pilots saw glowing balls of light in the sky. They became known as Foo Fighters. But Eisenhower and Churchill worried that these Foo Fighters were a German-directed energy weapon and took them very seriously. Prior to Foo Fighters, a US fighter plane over a laboratory in Dresden had lost all electrical power in his plane. The compass went wild, and there was obviously something on the ground being targeted at his aircraft. The Allies soon discovered a fiendish laboratory on the outskirts of Dresden that fired X-rays and other electromagnetic pulses at aircraft in an experimental directed energy weapon run by the Germans in World War II. Dresden was carpet bombed. So what happened after World War II? Well, the Americans got Operation Paperclip with Werner von Braun and a bunch of Germans, and the Russians got a lot of V2 weapons, and Britain got a directed energy weapon from the remains of the Dresden lab and one in Berlin, something called CW, continuous wave radar. Let me try and explain what CW radar is and why it's different. Most radar use a single dish that sends out a pulse and then it listens for a return. It's very economical, but at its best it goes bing, 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 and the bit in between is missing, and you have to play join the dots. CW, or continuous wave radar, sends out a searchlight beam, and so you get a continuous trace of the object that you're looking at. But it needs lots of power. I'm going to keep coming back in this video to mention the word power, because power is the key to everything. These CW German radars were taken back to, Bordsea, right next door to Orford Ness, and they were experimented on, made better, made into an advanced defensive and offensive, yes, offensive directed energy weapon called the Type 87 Scorpion radar. It's a continuous wave radar. It can track something from space to the ground in a continuous beam. But turn that type of CW radar up to 11 and you make a directed energy weapon. That was being built just down the road from Orford at Bordsea after World War II. And then these strange pagoda buildings were built on Orford Ness. AWRE, Atomic Weapons Research, they used Orford Ness. They used lots of power. And the use of atomic power in Britain is the key to understanding my story about Rendlesham Forest today. This is the classic footage of Queen Elizabeth opening a place called Calder Hall, a Magnox gas reactor.
From early morning, thousands of people have been arriving to witness an historic event in the industrial life of Britain and indeed of the world. Today, Her Majesty the Queen is coming to Calder Hall to open Britain's first atomic power station. The royal party arrives at Calder Hall.
It is with pride that I now open Calder Hall, Britain's first atomic power station.
Supposedly making electricity for your grandparents that was too cheap to meter. It didn't. It made plutonium for British bombs. But a Magnox type nuclear gas reactor can make a lot of electricity. The way that it works very simplified, is the nuclear reactor heats up gas. There's a heat exchanger in these big towers. It boils water, produces steam, and turns a turbine, making electricity for your kettle. So in 1955, Britain wanted to build the world's biggest nuclear power station. And where would they want to build it? Well, of course, they would build it near Sheffield, steel industry, or the car plant, or maybe near London. No, that's not what they did. Let's build it on a sandy, unstable shingle bank 138 miles from London, with no industry. Rural Suffolk, rural Norfolk, not much in Cambridge, and miles from any industry. It's a tiny village called Leiston. Why? It's one of the stupidest locations for Britain's nuclear power industry. It's hundreds of miles from the national grid. The cost to the CEGB of putting up the pylons from Leiston to London was ridiculous. So why did they build the world's biggest nuclear power station, megawatts compared with anything else that had been built in any other country, in a small Suffolk village? Oh, hang on a minute. It's right next door to Orford Ness. Oh, brilliant. And it's just up the road from Bordsey. And we have two massive RAF bases, Bentwaters and Woodbridge, with some scrubby woodland in between. And of course, the GPO are using Martlesham Heath, and they've just built a Dastral Park, which is actually a defence laboratory. We've built a triangle of physics. So suddenly, that Suffolk triangle of Orford, Bordsey, Bentwaters and Martlesham now had a power supply. Sizewell A, secret nuclear power station, miles away from where it was needed, but boy, it could do anything with advanced military physics. So what was the first thing that they built now the power station was up and running? Cobra Mist. Everything you know about Cobra Mist, which is a giant experimental radio station, built on Orford Ness right next to Sizewell A nuclear power station, is a lie. It's not an over-the-horizon radar. It's a physics laboratory. They experimented with how EM frequencies affect DNA. They did probably experiment with radar, but what they really wanted in the Cold War was a non-nuclear EMP electromagnetic pulse generator that could zap the Ruskies if they ever invaded Western Europe. But hang on. Sending an EMP pulse all the way to Finland, where it was actually pointing, how do you do that? You need massive amount of power. Oh, we can use Sizewell A, the world's biggest power station. So do you begin to get the connection? If you want to build something very exotic that's very power hungry, you need a power supply. Sizewell A was the ideal power supply for Orford Ness, Bordsey, Bentwaters and Martlesham. It still is. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But is it true? Well, the one people who might know is a bunch of bird watchers. Why? The National Trust now run Orford Ness. Because Orford Ness is so secret, and because it had so many wacky advanced physics experiments, the guy who runs the National Trust, he was given a CEGB, Central Electricity Generating Board, secret plan of all the power interconnects for Orford Ness, where the cables are, where they're connected to, and where they pop out the ground to be plugged into various experiments that the British MOD have used over the years, just for safety reasons. And he shared them with me. There undoubtedly was a power interconnect from Sizewell A down to Orford Ness. There's various substations you can see, and then a man who bought an aircraft hangar at the now disused Bentwaters lifted up a concrete slab in his floor, only to discover the three biggest power cables he's ever seen. Secret power cables, probably stretching from Sizewell via Bentwaters to Martlesham, the second interconnect. In my humble opinion, if you understand how to switch it on, you understand how things work. Did you work at Sizewell A Nuclear Power Station? Did you redirect Sizewell A Nuclear Power to an MOD project on request? Please get in touch. I'd love to know what really happened at Sizewell A, because I deeply think that if you understand how it was all powered, you begin to understand what people really did. It's a start of a fantastic rabbit hole for me. Get in touch, because the truth needs to be out there.